It's a debate as old as time. Should your favorite NFL team go best player available? Yeah, maybe they have somebody at that spot currently, but you're investing in a long-term asset, and he could be a superstar. Or do you fill a need right now? Maybe you've got an open spot that you need to have a game changer at, and maybe he's not the best player on the board, but he is a guy that can help put you over the top for that playoff run this season. Well, in my mock draft 3.0, we're going to discuss all of those possibilities. We've got a few trades, and we've got some changes atop the draft board. Free agency is all but done. The big names are signed up, and NFL teams have done a really good job of trying to fix the holes that were on their roster. But now we look ahead to the NFL draft at the end of April, and these NFL teams are going to be looking to not only add guys that can help them for the run right now, but be long-term assets for them. So the debate about best player available or filling a need is definitely something we're going to hear a lot over the next month. But there are also some teams that look like they are poised to make a jump to the top of the draft board to get either their potential game-changing quarterback, maybe a wide receiver, an offensive tackle, or a defensive player that can help change them into a playoff contender. And even though we have some changes at the top of my draft board, one thing we know for certain now, it looks like the Chicago Bears are going with Caleb Williams at the #1 spot. The last mock draft I did, I had Caleb Williams going to the Chicago Bears, and Justin Fields had not been traded yet, but it really felt like that was going to happen, and inevitably, it did. Now they are poised to take Caleb Williams at the top of the order and give themselves a new quarterback for the next 5 years. Is it the best move for the franchise? Probably, but we'll have to wait and see if Caleb Williams lives up to the hype. At #2 to Washington, I'm going to roll with Jaden Daniels still. Now, I've gone back and forth a couple of times on this one. Drake May was my pick at #2 for quite a while, but it feels like Washington wants to go with somebody with maybe a little bit more upside than what Drake May has. In fact, there's even been recent talk about JJ McCarthy going at #2. Now, that could be coach speak, it could be GMs trying to raise prices and things like that. Absolutely could just be noise out there in the void. But the possibility of JJ McCarthy going at #2 overall, the odds of that have gone from plus 1,300 to only plus 300 over the last several days. I'm still going to roll with Jaden Daniels. I think he's going to be a great fit in this offense. He brings ton of athleticism. He throws over the middle of the field very well. He's got to bulk up a little bit and add a little bit more size, but those are all things that NFL weight training programs can do for you. At one point, I felt like maybe New England would address the quarterback situation through free agency, and they did end up getting Jacoby Brissett. Maybe they feel like he can be a guy to lead them in 2024, and they spend maybe a later round pick on Michael Penix or Bo Nix, and they decide to go with Marvin Harrison here. But really, the way that their offseason shaped out, I feel like it's going to be a quarterback. And at this point in time, I believe it would end up being Drake May. He's not being talked about like Jaden Daniels or JJ McCarthy, and he doesn't seem to have the same upside that those two potentially do. But Drake May also could have a much better floor. And quite honestly, that's going to be the best thing for New England at this point. Those moves are going to allow Marvin Harrison Jr. to drop to #4 to the Arizona Cardinals. And there's been some talk that this would kind of be that first spot that teams would try to trade up to if they're trying to come up and get JJ McCarthy if the first 3 quarterbacks are off the board. I don't think Arizona could pass up on Marvin Harrison Jr. though. You got to give Kyler Murray another weapon, and if Kyler Murray doesn't end up working out and you decide to try and get a quarterback next year, you're going to want to have some weapons in place for him. Marvin Harrison Jr. would be a great addition to Trey McBride in that offense. Now, this is where I could see Minnesota moving up to draft JJ McCarthy, and this is where I'm going to put them. Now, it would end up costing them both of their first round picks this year and probably a little bit more, but maybe not a 2025 first round pick. But to come up here and trade with the Los Angeles Chargers really makes a lot of sense. The Chargers have some glaring holes that need to be filled. They need some weapons on offense, and their defense has a couple of spots that they could get stronger in. And with Jim Harbaugh there now, it makes sense that they would try to beef up their draft assets, try to grab a few more guys and start building that roster up with a little bit more youth once again. Now, the perfect game day scenario would be Justin Herbert is traded and then Jim Harbaugh goes with JJ McCarthy at #5. I don't think that happens, and Chargers fans, you're probably going to yell at me for even bringing that up, but I do believe Minnesota is going to be the front runner for JJ, and this would be the spot I could see them coming to draft him. At number 6, the New York Giants are going to go with Malik Neighbors. Now, there's also a little bit of talk, and I have heard through some of my connections as well, that JJ McCarthy to the New York Giants is a real possibility, and that's one of the reasons why any team that wants him underneath the New York Giants are going to have to come up to get him. And again, it could just be noise in the void, but like I said, I have actually heard from people I know that JJ McCarthy to the New York Giants is a really good possibility. But in this scenario, it's not happening because he's not available. So let's get Daniel Jones a weapon. You invested a lot of money in Daniel Jones last year. Let's get him Malik Neighbors and pair him with some of the other guys that they have on that roster, like a Jalen Hyatt. Who knows if Darren Waller is going to be out there or if he's going to be out there much this coming season. They need some offensive playmakers, especially considering they just lost their number 1 playmaker, Saquon Barkley. At number 7, Tennessee is going to go with Joe Alt. They have done a really good job of adding weapons to this offense and game changers to the defense. Getting L'Jarius Sneed was a huge win for them, but now they are going to have to beef up that offensive line. Joe Alt being the best offensive tackle in this draft would be perfect. He'll give Will Levis a little bit more time in the pocket, and it will allow Will Levis to hopefully get better and grow as the season goes on. At number 8 for Atlanta, I'm going to go with Dallas Turner. And I heard from a few Atlanta fans the other day that they do not want to go defense here. But you hired a defensive head coach. I absolutely believe after the moves that have been made, bringing Kirk Cousins in, you're going to be okay with the offense that you have in place. Let's work on the defense and make it so those teams in the NFC South don't have an opportunity to score. Dallas Turner would be a great fit. He's definitely the edge one in this class, does a good job of getting at the quarterback and helping to stop the run, burst, acceleration, everything that you need from that type of a player. The Chicago Bears have a second top 10 pick, and this is where I see them addressing the defensive side of the ball with Jared Verse out of Florida State. Now, I could also see the Chicago Bears moving back here, especially if JJ McCarthy ends up falling back to this part of the draft. Those teams that are looking to draft him could get up to number 9 a lot easier than getting up to one of those top 5 or 6 spots. So keep an eye on the Chicago Bears to be movers on draft day. However, with a second top 10 pick, I really feel like they keep it. They get a game changer on the defensive side of the ball, so Montez Sweat isn't getting double teamed too often, and then you put yourself in a position to really take the next step this year and not have to wait. At number 10, the New York Jets are going to go with Talise Fuaga, offensive tackle out of Oregon State, and he's one of the fastest rising tackles in this draft. Scouts love his athleticism, they love his baller mentality, and they really feel like he's going to be a mauler in the trenches for years to come. The New York Jets need help on the offensive line. They need to help protect Aaron Rodgers, and Fuaga is definitely going to be a guy that does that. A great combination of a really safe floor and a really high upside. One of the most talked about offensive tackles in the draft so far. At number 11, where the Chargers moved back to after their trade with Minnesota, their first of 2 first-round picks now, I definitely could foresee them going with an offensive tackle here, and I know Charger fans are not going to love that, especially given the wide receivers that are on the board right now. But let me tell you, as a tried and true Michigan fan, it is absolutely inevitable that Jim Harbaugh is going to want to address the offensive line. Even at the coaches meeting this past week, he talked about how the offensive line is the most important group on all of the football field. Everything runs through the offensive line. I really feel like they're going to go offensive line first, because then later in the draft, with how deep this wide receiver pool is, then they can get their wide receiver a little bit later on. So they go with a guy that Jim Harbaugh is familiar with and has seen play for the last 3 years. Olumawaya Fashanu, offensive tackle out of Penn State. Once was regarded as the top offensive tackle in this draft. He's slipped a little bit, but it's not really because of anything he's done. It's just because of how everybody else has been rising. He is still a very safe bet to be able to step in and help this Chargers offense right away. At number 12, we're going to go with Brock Bowers, tight end out of Georgia, to be drafted by the Denver Broncos. And this isn't one that I've loved. This isn't one that I've seen myself doing all offseason long, mocking Brock Bowers here. But after doing a little bit more reading and listening to some of the talking heads out in Denver, who I do believe some of them are very good, like Ben Albright, it gave me the feeling that Brock Bowers is absolutely going to be on the radar because Sean Payton needs to have a tight end that he can utilize. And I know that he's had some tight ends that he could potentially use out there, and I get that. Why aren't we going to give them a shot? But Brock Bowers is considered one of the best tight end prospects since Kyle Pitts. When you take a look at his draft profile, his strength really is after he has the ball in his hands. He gets yards after the catch. He knows how to make people miss. He knows how to run through tackles. He knows how to be aggressive with the ball in his hands. Also, his contested catchability over the middle of the field is definitely something that could be utilized heavily in this Denver offense, and he consistently beats zone coverage. This is a guy that if you give him an opportunity to roam around in a zone type of defensive scheme, he's going to find those holes in that scheme, and he's going to make himself available for whoever the quarterback will be this year for the Denver Broncos. Now, in terms of his weakness, it is right now kind of separation and being a little bit more aggressive in his route running. He does have some issues against more physical defenders, and he needs to work on having a total route tree. Like I mentioned, he beats zone consistently, but when we find him in more man-on-man coverage where we have somebody over the top of him, he's going to have to be a little bit better with his routes, and he's going to have to get physical. Bowers can find open space in any zone coverage, and he makes teams pay with that with big plays after the catch. He needs to be more consistent with his separation though, and when it comes to more physical defenders at the NFL level, he's going to have to work on using those hands to get himself free. At number 13, we're going to go with Terrion Arnold, cornerback out of Alabama. Now, he is not my cornerback one. We'll talk about that in a minute. But Antonio Pierce has had multiple meetings with Arnold, and it really feels like, based on some of the things he has said, that Arnold appears to be one of his top players on the board. And because they've had so many face-to-face meetings already, if Arnold is here and available for Pierce, it would not shock me if he goes this route to help make his defense better in a division where your defense is going to have to be good. In number 14, the New Orleans Saints are going to go with Amarius Mims, offensive tackle out of Georgia. Now, when it comes to offensive tackle prospects, Amarius Mims has probably the widest range of outcomes because he's very, very raw. He's got a really good skill set. He's strong, he's big, he's fast, he moves well. But some of those technique things need to be refined because he hasn't been a starter all that long in the college ranks. But when you talk about guys with the highest upside possibility, he fits into that category. He probably has a higher upside than what even Joe Alt has at the tackle position in this year's class. Now, if New Orleans Saints wanted to play it safe, they would probably go with a different offensive tackle here. But we don't win ships playing it safe. Go with the highest upside, and that's going to be Mims for me. Now, there is some discussions on whether or not their right tackle is going to be healthy enough for this season. Trevor Penning at left tackle really hasn't grown all that much over his NFL career so far. So Mims could start out at right tackle and then potentially move to left tackle in the next year or two. At number 15, the Indianapolis Colts are going to go with my cornerback one, Quinyon Mitchell out of Toledo. And the scouting report shows that this guy absolutely has true cornerback one capabilities written all over him. The Indianapolis Colts are going to find themselves playing 2 games against the likes of Trevor Lawrence, Will Levis, and CJ Stroud for the foreseeable future. And because of that, you are going to have some really good cornerbacks. And Quinyon Mitchell was a very intriguing prospect leading up to the combine. But after blowing up the combine, he is the cornerback one on a lot of boards right now. He's got acceleration and closing speed. One thing you see with Mitchell on tape is the fact that when he plays in man coverage, he has such elite closing speed that quarterbacks will typically throw his way quite often because the receiver looks open when they look at them, but all of a sudden Mitchell is able to close so fast that he closes that gap up, and then there's nothing there for the quarterback to throw to. He has great anticipation and he has great vision, and he's smooth with his feet and hips when he's he's tracking against wide receivers. He's able to flip those hips really easily. His feet are smooth. He's never tripping on himself. He always looks like he is in a position to do exactly what he wants. Now, some of the things that he needs to work on, because he played man coverage so often, he needs to have his eyes up in zone coverage a little bit better. Sometimes he can lose track of those wide receivers when they switch to zone, and he doesn't stay with them in his zone a little bit more often. Now, he also can become a little overly aggressive to jump routes. He's got really, really good anticipation and vision, but because he gets so aggressive sometimes, especially at the NFL level, if there's any type of a fake sold or if it's a really good route runner, it could end up burning him, so he's just going to have to be careful about that. If you need a cornerback one to lock down wide receivers, then Mitchell is going to be the guy you want in this draft. He's physical, he's fast, he's fluid, and wide receivers are going to be trapped on an island when they are covered by Mitchell. He truly could end up being one of the next great man-to-man coverage cornerbacks in the NFL. At number 16, the Seattle offense needs a little bit of work on the line. However, you just hired a defensive-minded coach in Mike Macdonald. Let's go ahead and give him a really good defensive player. With Laiatu Latu, edge rusher out of UCLA, looked at as one of the most physically gifted players in this draft. A guy that when you look at him on the edge, he's got all the makings of a really, really good edge rusher. I think the biggest thing holding him back right now is his medical records from college. Teams might be a little bit worried about whether or not he's going to hold up in his NFL career, but if you're looking for upside at the edge position, Latu really fits that bill, and it would not shock me if he's drafted much higher than this either. Will Jerry and the Cowboys move up in the draft? Probably not, but I also don't think that they can afford to just sit back and potentially watch all of the top offensive tackles go drafted before they can get to them, because they need help on the offensive line, both on the interior and on the outside as well. And at number 17, the Jacksonville Jags have several areas that they could go with players a little bit later in the draft that might give them a little bit more value. So why not pick up some extra picks to help load your team back up and go ahead and let the Dallas Cowboys come up here to get offensive tackle J.C. Latham out of Alabama. Latham is a younger prospect, and he's considered a guy that is very raw in his potential. More than likely, his first year in the league, playing at right tackle would be his best case scenario. But he also could play at the guard position in year one if he needed to, and once he grew a little bit more, then he could go out to left tackle. But J.C. Latham is a really good prospect that you can move around the line and do some different things with, and potentially have him be your left tackle of the future after he grows for a year. At number 18, it seems like it's inevitable with the Cincinnati Bengals. Yes, they might need help on the offensive line. Yes, they may need help on defense. Who knows what else they may need, but if there is a top-tier wide receiver on the board, Cincinnati's going to be tied to them. And will Rome Odunze go much earlier than this spot? Yeah, it's absolutely possible, but it's going to depend on whether or not teams prioritize need or best players available earlier in the draft. But here, the Cincinnati Bengals are going to go with best player available, so now they can definitely fill in for Tyler Boyd, and if T. Higgins is traded or leaves after being franchise tagged for just 1 year, you've got a guy that can step in right away. And listen, as you look at the scouting report for Rome Odunze, you're going to look at the outlook at the bottom where I call him a more talented George Pickens, and you're going to think that I'm out of my mind. But that's what Rome Odunze really is. He is a physically gifted player down the field. He will go up and he will get balls. He will battle with cornerbacks. He will be physical. He will do everything that you need to do to win those jump balls down the field. His high point ability, going up and catching the ball at the highest point over the top of defenders, absolutely is going to be something that the Cincinnati Bengals could utilize. His route running is even good. A lot of times when you see these big physically gifted wide receivers that win in those contested situations, sometimes their route running isn't all that good. That's not the case for Odunze. He can absolutely run any route on the field and win all over the field. Weaknesses, a little bit of an an acceleration issue. He's not going to be the fastest wide receiver off the line, and winning at the line of scrimmage is another thing. Because of that lack of acceleration, sometimes he's not able to pull away from those cornerbacks right away, and because of that, he has some issues with that. And again, that also leads to a little bit of an issue with separation as well, and that's why I'm calling him a more talented George Pickens, because George Pickens cannot run the type of routes that Odunze can, but he shares a lot of the same gifts when it comes to being physical down the field and winning contested catches, and he also has an issue with winning at the line of scrimmage, separation, acceleration, everything like that. So he may lack some of the explosiveness as some of the other wide receivers in this class, but he may be the most physical wide receiver in this class as well. I really like Odunze, and honestly, he could play in the slot year one for the Cincinnati Bengals, and then he could move outside if T. Higgins is gone next year. At number 19, the LA Rams are going to have to replace Aaron Donald, and I don't mean completely replace him, but they're going to need somebody in the middle of the defense to really help fill the gap that is now going to be there. Nobody can truly replace Aaron Donald. He's going to go down as one of the greatest defensive players of all time, one of the greatest defensive tackles, if not the greatest defensive tackle of all time, and he's going to be remembered as one of the all-time greats. So you can't truly replace him, but interior defensive lineman Jerzon Newton out of Illinois will do a good job of at least helping. He's like Aaron Donald in terms of being able to stuff the center so the run can't get through up the middle, but also being able to use his hands, attack the guards, and be able to win on the inside, getting to the quarterback very often as well. Jackson Powers Johnson, center out of Oregon, is a perfect fit right here for Pittsburgh. And Pittsburgh, they may need to move up a little bit to try and get him, but if there is a move I want to see Pittsburgh make, it's this one right here. They need help at center. They've got a quarterback situation that's going to be playing out this year. They're going to have to run the football, and they're going to have to block. Jackson Powers Johnson, there isn't really a better fit in the entire first round than this one right here. Just like the LA Rams, the Miami Dolphins also lost a big-time defensive tackle this offseason in Christian Wilkins, and now they're going to have to try and replace him as well. And this is where Byron Murphy, interior defensive lineman out of Texas, will go. He's also a big riser, and there are some that consider him to be the #1 interior defensive lineman in this class. Another athlete that can do a really, really good job of stuffing the run and helping to keep teams from running right up the middle on them, but also possessing the pass rush abilities needed to get after the quarterback. To end 2023, Philadelphia secondary was awful. They couldn't stop wide receivers to save themselves. And they've had some changes in the secondary, but Kool-Aid McKinstry coming in to help fill a void would absolutely be a great fit for this Philadelphia team. Now, the last mock draft that I did, I also had Kool-Aid McKinstry going here to Philadelphia, and I still think it's a great fit. But in the comments, I heard from Philadelphia fans telling me that if I knew ball, imagine that, Philadelphia would never spend their pick on a guy like Kool-Aid McKinstry. And all of a sudden after Alabama's pro day, where Kool-Aid is like, all right, I've kind of brought back some of the hype about myself. The combine brought a lot of eyes on some other guys. People forgot about me at his pro day. All eyes were back on him, and he showed out and played well. There's a lot of people talking Kool-Aid to Philadelphia, just like I was doing weeks ago. So Philadelphia fans, you may not love it, you may not think it's a great fit, but I'm not the only one saying it either. At number 23, the Chargers' second first-round pick after trading with Minnesota is going to bring the wide receiver that everybody was probably asking about at the beginning of the draft. But really reinforcing your offensive line and then getting Brian Thomas Jr. here in the draft would be a huge win for this offense. Brian Thomas Jr. has an opportunity to be a complete wide receiver on the outside. And Malik Neighbors is getting a bunch of Jamar Chase comparisons coming out of LSU, but people are not talking about Brian Thomas Jr., who I feel has huge potential to be a game changer and impact player right away at the NFL level. At number 24, Jacksonville is going to go with Troy Fautanu, guard/offensive tackle out of Washington. And for Fautanu, there's a lot of people talking about the ability for him to play guard right away at the NFL level. And I agree with that, but I also believe after a year in an NFL program, he's going to get himself to the point where he could end up playing tackle. And for Jacksonville, this may not feel like a sexy pick, but you need to do better at the guard position right away. There's no doubt about that, especially with Trevor Lawrence at quarterback and trying to get him back on track in 2024. But both of your offensive tackles have expiring contracts after the season. You could easily move Fatano out to the offensive tackle position next season and be just fine, even if it's at right tackle. All right, Green Bay fans, Graham Barton's not going to be a sexy pick here. You could look at a guy like Nate Wiggins or Chop Robinson or guys like that are coming up next and say, I really like them a whole lot better than I like Graham Barton. But once again, we kind of go back to that need versus best player available type of mentality. And we've done best player available in this draft, and we've done needs in this draft. And for Green Bay, it feels like it's a need type draft. You've got Jordan Love, who is still on the younger side. You need to protect him and make sure that he's good to go moving forward. You don't want him getting banged up. And because of the way your offensive line has been broken down this offseason, you're going to have to start building it back up. And Graham Barton is a guy that's seen primarily as a guard, but also could end up playing center as well. So it gives you some flexibility on the offensive line, helps reinforce it, will help in the run game, will help keep Jordan Love protected. And really, honestly, if you feel like your team is good enough to make a Super Bowl run in 2024, then go ahead and draft for need and make sure your offensive line isn't the downfall of the season. At number 26, the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, they need help on the interior of the offensive line. But really everybody that's left here for that spot seems to be too much of a reach. So let's go ahead and do best player available here for you and give your defense just a little bit of a jolt with Chop Robinson, edge rusher out of Penn State. Now heading on over to the scouting report, Chop Robinson has been a riser since the NFL Combine. He showed that great athleticism there, the speed in the 40 and the agility work. His first step wins a majority of the time. He's very explosive off the line of scrimmage, and he's able to just physically impose those offensive tackles with his athleticism alone. Now, he does have some areas of weakness. He's got some things that need to be refined when it comes to his technique. He needs to work on having more counters in his playbook. Right now, really at the college level, he won based off athleticism alone. He really needs to work on adding some more of those counters, so when he's going up against those physically gifted offensive tackles that also can win based on athleticism, he's going to be able to outsmart them. He's got to get more physical with his hands. He's got to be willing to get his hands up into the chest pad of the offensive tackle. But the problem with that is sometimes he is going to lack some length on some of the tackles that have a little bit longer arms. He could be a good NFL edge just based on his athletic traits alone. He could go to the NFL level and be a serviceable player right now. But if he wants to be great, if he wants to be one of the top NFL edge rushers, then he's going to have to improve his technique, and he's going to have to find a way to win that isn't solely based on his athletic ability. Arizona sticks on the outside with their second first-round pick at number 27. At the beginning of the draft, they went with Marvin Harrison Jr. on the outside of the offense, and now on the outside of the defense, they go with speedster Nate Wiggins out of Clemson. This is a guy that could have absolutely blown up the combine if it had not been for a quad issue after he ran his first blazing fast 40. He might be a little bit undersized, but what he doesn't have in size, he makes up with a lot of other gifts and abilities. He's definitely fast enough, and Arizona needs some help on that defensive level. At number 28, I'm going to have the Buffalo Bills go with a wide receiver and Adonai Mitchell out of Texas. Now, people are talking about Xavier Worthy way more often, but Adonai Mitchell is over Xavier Worthy to me because I think he's a more complete wide receiver. If you take a look at Mitchell's scouting report, his strengths really start with his size plus his speed plus his agility. A lot of times when you find those bigger wide receivers, they lack some of that agility that you need to be really good in and out of your routes. But Adonai Mitchell has such great footwork at the line of scrimmage, added with that agility that his route running is actually pretty spectacular. His weaknesses right now is going to be having to be more physical at the point of attack, catching the ball fall in traffic. Sometimes when he works over the middle of the field, he can kind of get lost in the fray a little bit, and sometimes he kind of lets that potential of getting hit leak into his head a little bit, and he doesn't either run the route to its fullest ability or might have a bad drop. He plays fast, he plays fluid for a wide receiver of his size. He just needs to become more physical if he wants to become that true, complete outside wide receiver, and spending a year potentially with Stefon Diggs is going to do that, and that's why I've got Adonai Mitchell going to Buffalo. I know that they have some guys there that they're excited about, but listen, you have a lot of money invested in Josh Allen. If Stefon Diggs is truly going to be traded here soon, or his contract ends up expiring while he's in Buffalo, you're going to need a wide receiver one to take over. Bring in Mitchell right now so he can learn from Diggs, milk everything he needs to out of that situation, and then from whenever you inevitably move on from Stefon Diggs, you have somebody that can step in. At number 29, I'm going to go with Cooper DeJean, cornerback out of Iowa. He is a Dan Campbell and Brad Holmes guy. They've already showed you they're not afraid to move up in a draft to take an injured player. See Jamison Williams a couple of years ago. Cooper DeJean is coming off of a pretty big injury, but he should be just fine by the time the season gets here. And honestly, he's not going to have to be a cornerback one with Carlton Davis in the mix now. So you absolutely have a game changer on the other side of the field from Carlton Davis. But not only that, he's one of those tough, hard-nosed, grinding, hardworking kids out of Iowa. Sam Laporta, Jack Campbell, same thing we heard about them last year, same thing we hear about Cooper DeJean, and one of the primary reasons why not only does he fit a need for the Detroit Lions, but he also is going to be one of the better players available that is falling because of that injury, and of course, he fits the culture. At number 30, we're going to go with Jordan Morgan, offensive tackle out of Arizona to the Baltimore Ravens. Now, this is drafting for more of a need than it is best player available. And quite honestly, really any of these teams here at the end of the draft, I could see them trading out of the first round, especially if there's somebody that's wanting to try and come back into the first to grab like a Michael Penix or a Bo Nix at the end of the first. But when I take a look at Jordan Morgan, Baltimore needs to do a lot on their offensive line. They got to replace some guys, and their offensive line isn't getting much younger. You've got an MVP player at the quarterback position right now that you're paying a lot of money to. You need to keep him protected. At number 31, I'm going to go with Tyler Guyton. Again, another pick that I could see moving out of the first round, but Tyler Guyton out of Oklahoma could absolutely step in and be the starter at right tackle right now. They have a little bit of a battle there, and San Francisco fans, you can let me know what you think about it, but personally, from what I've seen and what I've read, there's not a whole lot of people optimistic that whoever wins that right tackle spot is really going to be all that good. Tyler Guyton could be better than both of them right away. At number 32, this one might not seem like it makes a whole lot of sense to a lot of you, but I'm going to go with Xavier Worthy out of Texas to Kansas City. Now, after trading L'Jarius Sneed, it would not shock me if Kansas City tries to take a shot at a cornerback. And there's a couple of cornerbacks here at the end of the first round that could end up fitting Kansas City, but I also know that they could wait and probably get a decent cornerback a little bit later as well. They've already signed Marquise Brown, so adding a wide receiver isn't that big of a need as it once was, but why not, right? This is an offense that used to have so much speed when it came to having Tyreek Hill on that side of the offense, and even Travis Kelce at one point in time was probably a little bit more agile than he is right now entering his mid-30s. Grab Xavier Worthy. Spread this offense out. Go 3 wide receivers with Travis Kelce. The middle of the field is going to be consistently open. Rashee Rice, Xavier Worthy, Marquise Brown, and Travis Kelce are going to take at least 4 defenders on their own, plus probably another one, which is going to leave huge gaps for Isaiah Pacheco to run the football. Yeah, this might not be a best player available. It might not be best fit. It might be somebody saying, Kyle, I think you're thinking about fantasy football a little too much, but I'm really not. Just look at how much fun this Kansas City Chiefs offense could be. Just think about how spread out and fast the Miami Dolphins are. That could be the Kansas City Chiefs with a great quarterback at the helm and an offensive game plan that continues to work year after year. All right, wrapping up the video, here are all 32 of my first round picks. Once again, if you missed any while we were going through the video, maybe scrolled over one, here are those picks once again, so you can just go back through and compare where I have different guys right now. But hopefully you all appreciated this latest mock draft. We're definitely gonna have at least one more before the NFL draft gets here, so stay tuned because we are gonna have tons of rookie coverage and dynasty coverage coming up once we know where certain players land. But for now, I'm gonna call it there. Peace out, Headliner Nation. Stay safe and stay healthy, and I'll catch you all on the next episode of the Fantasy Headliners.